The scream tore through the quiet hallway like a crack of thunder, sharp enough to freeze every breath around it. Blood splattered against the faded lockers, a girl's backpack lay ripped open on the floor, and 3 boys towered over the trembling new girl whose terrified eyes darted for help. And that was the moment a scarred, silent figure at the end of the corridor stopped walking. The man's jaw tightened, his posture shifted, and the cold, disciplined presence of a soldier returning to battle filled the school hallway. No one knew his name. No one knew his past. But the bullies were about to find out exactly who had been standing quietly among them all along. If you believe in kindness, courage, and second chances, make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe to channel name. It helps us bring more powerful stories to you. His name was Ethan Cole, a single dad and a former Army medic who carried his past in the silence between breaths. Ever since returning home, he lived with a strange blend of peace and ghosts, memories of desert sands, the deafening thump of helicopter blades, the sting of loss that came without warning. But he hid it well for the sake of his daughter, Lily, a soft-spoken 12-year-old who had his eyes and her mother's kindness. He tried to rebuild his life by working as a school maintenance supervisor, fixing things quietly while avoiding attention. He liked it that way, predictable, simple, safe. Until the day the new girl arrived. Her name was Amara, a transfer student who kept her hair tucked behind her face and carried her books like shields. She walked the halls with a hesitance no child should have, as if expecting the world to collapse every time she took a step. Ethan noticed her the first morning when she sat alone in the cafeteria, staring at her tray like it was something foreign. Something in her eyes reminded him of young soldiers he'd treated, too quiet for their age, too familiar with fear. He told himself to stay in his lane. He wasn't a teacher. He wasn't a counselor. He was just the guy who fixed broken doors and tightened loose screws. But sometimes people notice broken things because they know what it feels like to be one. The tension had been growing for days. Ethan had overheard whispers from other students, the kind that carried cruelty like a sport. He caught glimpses of Amara flinching when someone bumped her, walking with her shoulders hunched, almost apologizing for existing. Lily tried talking to her once, but Amara politely pulled away with a small, nervous smile. Something wasn't right. Ethan felt that instinct he thought he left behind, the one that tightened his chest when someone vulnerable was in danger. So, when he heard the scream, he reacted before thought had time to catch up. The hallway was nearly empty, shadows long and the air cold. 3 boys, 8th graders with size but not sense, had cornered Amara near the science wing. Her books were stolen, her art papers torn, and her hands were shaking as she begged them to stop. One shoved her. Another laughed. A third snapped a pencil across her notebook, calling her names that stabbed deeper than a knife. And then Ethan saw it, the faint bruise on her wrist that hadn't been there days before. This wasn't the first time. He didn't shout. He didn't threaten. He simply walked forward with a calmness that made the air itself tighten. The boys turned, expecting another terrified teacher. Instead, they saw a man whose eyes carried storms. A man with a posture of someone who'd stood between life and death more often than they could imagine. Ethan stepped between them and Amara, his presence alone enough to make the tallest boy swallow hard. He told them to leave. His voice was low, steady, and sharp enough to slice through their bravado. They scattered quickly, trying to mask fear with muttered excuses, but Ethan's gaze followed them until they disappeared. Only then did he kneel beside Amara, the same way he had knelt beside wounded soldiers, slow, gentle, giving her space to breathe. She wouldn't lift her head at first. She kept apologizing for the mess, for the trouble, for existing. Ethan's heart cracked at the fragility in her voice. Something inside him, the father, the medic, the human, reached out carefully. He picked up her torn papers, straightened the ones he could, and asked if she was hurt. She said no, but her voice trembled too much to believe. He didn't push, he simply stayed, letting her feel safe without demanding anything from her. That small moment changed everything. Word spread faster than wildfire. Teachers whispered about the quiet maintenance man who had stepped in. Students talked about how the bullies backed away like they'd been confronted by someone far more dangerous than a school employee. But no one knew the truth. No one knew the years Ethan had spent in war zones, the soldiers he'd saved, or the nightmares that still curled around his nights. To them, he was a mystery. To Amara, he was the first adult who didn't look away. Over the next days, Ethan noticed more. The way Amara winced when someone raised their voice. The way she kept checking the door behind her. The way she never mentioned her home. And the more he saw, the more the truth unraveled. Amara wasn't just being bullied, she was carrying something heavier, something hidden behind her silence. Ethan recognized signs he wished he didn't: fear of adults, fear of being touched, fear of being noticed. One evening after school, Lily found Amara sitting alone under the oak tree where students normally gathered with friends. But she didn't have any. Lily, with her big heart and shy smile, sat beside her and didn't speak. She just offered a snack. Amara looked at it like no one had ever given her kindness before. That small gesture became the bridge she needed. Slowly, she started talking to Lily. Slowly, she started trusting her. And eventually, she trusted Ethan too. Piece by piece, her story came out in whispers. She had moved from another city after her mother left and her stepfather became unpredictable. The school hadn't known the full situation. Her fear wasn't from bullies alone, it was from a home that didn't feel like home. Ethan listened with the patience of someone who had spent years hearing stories of brokenness. He didn't judge. He didn't rush. He simply helped her breathe again. He realized he couldn't walk away now. Not when a child needed safety in a world that had taken it from her. So he contacted the right people: school counselors, child protective services, and a family friend who worked with youth support agencies. He documented everything he had seen, making sure Amara's voice would be protected. And when the investigation began, Ethan stayed beside her every step of the way. He became the person she leaned on when the world felt too heavy. Slowly, Amara's life shifted: less fear, more support, and the first hints of healing. The bullies were disciplined, their parents called in, the school warned, and a program was set up to address school harassment. But the real victory wasn't punishment. It was Amara learning to walk the halls without shrinking. It was her smile appearing more often. It was the moment she sat with Lily at lunch, laughing softly at something only kids understood. And it was the moment she whispered to Ethan that she felt safe for the first time in years. If this story has touched your heart in any way, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us bring more real, powerful stories to you. Before we end, share in the comments what kindness means to you. In the months that followed, Ethan became more than the quiet man who fixed broken things in the school. He became the quiet protector, the one kids waved to, the one teachers trusted, the one Amara looked up to like a father figure she never had. He didn't ask for recognition. He didn't want praise. He only cared about doing what was right, the same way he had done on battlefields far from home. But this time, he wasn't saving soldiers. He was saving childhoods. And perhaps, without realizing it, Amara saved a part of him too, the part that needed to believe that broken people could still create something good in the world. Because sometimes heroes don't wear uniforms anymore. Sometimes they wear work boots, carry toolboxes, and quietly guard the hallways where children learn to feel safe again. And the bullies? They never forgot the day they learned who he truly was: not a janitor, not a mere staff member, but a man who had once stood between life and death and refused to let fear win, not for himself, and certainly not for a child who needed a protector. In the end, Ethan didn't just step in. He stepped up. And that changed everything.